Well, considering I was cut off on the last one, I ran out of time on the video. Let me just kind of hit the four and then we'll go back to rebel. So remember, the conformist is the one that accepts the conventional means and the cultural goals. So they believe that the way that you achieve the cultural goals to society is by doing it through the legitimate way. Okay, so they accept both. The innovative is the one that rejects the conventional means. For some reason, they've been blocked or it's difficult for them to do things through the conventional means in order to achieve the cultural goals. But they do believe in achieving the cultural goals. The ritualist, on the other hand, actually accepts the conventional means, but they reject the cultural goals. They realize that even though they're working, even though that they're doing everything that society says that they should do, they understand that they're not going to be able to achieve the cultural goals of that society. The retreatist rejects both. They reject the cultural goals and the conventional means. They understand that they're not going to be able to achieve either one of those. And so for them, they're fine with knowing that they're not going to achieve those. They're not trying to change anything. So they're happy living in the structure of the society, but they still don't accept the means and the goals. Now, the rebel, on the other hand, rejects the means and the goals, but they want new means and they seek new goals. So this could be people who are, so they reject the whole convention means and the cultural goals in order for a counterculture. People who may join a commune because they're developing their own culture, their own society. They may believe that the cultural goals of society are to maybe live in peace and harmony, and the conventional means to be able to achieve those could be people could be living off the land, living with each other, and having shared responsibilities. Okay. So the rebel, even though they reject both of them, they're trying to change and create new conventional means and new cultural goals, basically trying to recreate a new society. So Hershey's bond or Hershey's control theory, he's looking at how people commit deviant acts. And one of the things that he says is that when you have weak bonds in these areas here, that could be a way to kind of promote people to commit deviant acts. So according to theorist Travis Hershey, people are socially controlled by certain types of bonds such as attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief. These bonds encourage conformity, but if bonds weaken, the likelihood of deviance increases. So attachment, according to Hershey, strong social attachments encourage conformity. Weak family, peer, and school relationships leave people freer to engage in deviance. So if you have weak family bonds, weak peer and school relationship bonds, it normally leaves people freer to engage in some types of deviance. So whenever those bonds are strong in those areas, if I have strong bonds with my family, strong bonds with my peers, and in my school relationships, then one of the things is that it encourages me to conform to the rules within society. Opportunity. The greater the access to legitimate opportunity, the greater advantages of conformity. So therefore, if I live in a neighborhood or if I'm somewhere and I notice that I have an opportunity to maybe become successful, right, then that helps me to have stronger bonds. By contrast, someone with little confidence in future success is more likely to drift towards deviance. And we may have heard this from time to time, or maybe hear people who maybe say, I didn't think I was going to reach the age of 21, or I don't think that there's anything out there for me. And these are typically going to be younger people that will talk about that I don't see any opportunities for me. And so that may kind of encourage or kind of push people to commit deviant acts. Involvement, and this is extensive involvement in legitimate activity, inhibits deviance, such as kind of holding a job, going to school, playing sports, maybe being involved in different activities. This inhibits deviance. One of the reasons why is because I don't have a lot of time on my hands. By contrast, people who simply hang out waiting for something to happen, they have time and energy to engage in deviant activity. Belief. This is the strong belief in conventional morality and respect for authority controls deviance. People who have a weak conscience or who are left unsupervised are more open to temptation. So basically what he's saying is that if you have strong bonds in these areas here, you're going to be less likely to engage in deviant behavior. When you have strong bonds in this area, that means that you have a strong sense of conformity, which means that you're going to be, once again, if I have strong bonds here, I'm going to be less likely. When there are weak bonds in these areas, I'm going to be more likely, because it's almost the idea that I really don't have much to lose in that aspect. Another macro-structural approach, conflict theory, and it links the study of deviance to power relationships and social inequality resulting from economic organizations of capitalist society. Crime committed amongst the poorest groups is viewed as a result of economic status of those groups and the ability of those who engage in elite deviance to hide their crimes, such as corporate crime or white-collar crime. And they're also able to avoid criminal labels as a result of their access to political and economic power. So one of the things with conflict theorists is that they're going to see so one thing with conflict theorists is that they're going to look at the inequality within society and point out that, once again, those who have the resources, who have the opportunities, they're able to hide their crimes. So it's not the idea that they don't commit deviant acts, but they're able to redefine them because they have the power in society to do that. Those who don't have that power, or those who maybe fall within a lower socioeconomic structure, within a lower socioeconomic class, they don't have that power or the resources to be able to hide their crimes. Conflict theorists argue that law is created by elites to protect their interests of the dominant class and to regulate populations that pose a threat to affluent interests and to bring them into conformity through social control. Social control agents such as police and mental health workers have the power to label less powerful people as evident of patterns of arrest data. One of the strengths of conflict theory, when it's looking at deviance, is it provides insight into the significance of power relationships in the definition, identification, and handling of deviance. Conflict theory also offers a powerful analysis of how injustice produces crime and result in different systems of justice for disadvantaged and privileged groups. A weakness of conflict theory is that it's less effective in explaining formal forms of deviance other than crime, or forms of deviance not involving economic interests. This theory links deviance to social inequality. The norms, including laws, reflect the interests of powerful members of society or a dominant group. And there is a struggle between social groups, the powerful and the powerless. Therefore, the groups with the most power are the ones that are able to control the norms of society. Differential association theory actually falls under symbolic interactionism. And one of the things that this theory basically says is that individuals become deviant by associating with people who follow criminal norms. People are more likely to learn deviance in primary social groups, especially peer groups. This theory explains that people continue to commit deviant acts due to continual exposure to others who violate norms and laws. If you hang out with gang members, you will act like a gang member and become a gang member. That's kind of the idea of that. Being exposed to deviant behavior on a regular basis by those who are important to us is what makes someone deviant. Now, this is just a theory, so this is not true in every single case, okay? One of the things it has to look at is it looks at the frequency, duration, and intensity of interactions with those of their primary group that engage in deviant behavior. So it can't be something where I'm just kind of hanging out a little bit. We have to look at that frequency and how long I hang out with someone and the intensity of that. Critics of differential association theory have argued that this perspective tends to blame deviance on the values of a particular group. It is class bias. For example, using differential association theory to explain higher rates of crime among the poor and working class, argue that there's higher rates occur because they do not share the values of the middle class. It is class bias because it overlooks the deviance that often occurs in middle class culture and among elites. This theory can be linked with labeling theory, can be linked with conflict theory and also within symbolic interactionism. It's linked with conflict theory because it shows that those with the power are the ones who are able to label an act or a person as deviant and impose sanctions that wield greater power in determining societal understanding of deviance. According to symbolic interactionists, a person's sense of self developed through interactions with others, and interactions with others teach individuals how to act, what to say, and what to think. Applying this theory to the study of deviance, symbolic interactionists study the process by which deviance is socially constructed, how behavior gets defined as deviant, and why certain groups of people are labeled as deviant. Labeling theory is an important interactionist approach to understanding criminality. Labeling theory explains why certain people become labeled as deviant. Howard Becker, in 1963, argued that people who represent law and order, or those who have the power to impose definitions of morality, do most of the labeling. The school teacher has the power to label the disruptive boy a troublemaker or a delinquent. If the child is regularly told he's a delinquent, it's possible that he may internalize that label, and the label becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Labeling theory distinguishes between primary and secondary deviance, and then eventually a deviant identity or a stigmatized identity. Primary deviants may violate some norms, but they don't take on this deviant identity. So primary deviance may be the idea that a person is described as a drinker, which defines this person's primary deviance. So if I'm defined as a drinker, but I don't accept that label, right? Someone has given me that label, but I don't accept that. That's primary deviation. Secondary deviation is when people maybe take notice and even say something about the violation of the norms. The person who's violating the norms takes on this deviant identity. So the person that was described as a drinker, and other people may start excluding them from parties or get-togethers where they know there's going to be alcohol. This person may start to drink more and even seek the company of people who are drinkers. They start to identify with this label, and they get a deviant identity or a stigmatized identity. A stigma is a powerful negative label that greatly changes a person's self-concept and social identity. The formation of a deviant identity involves the process of social transformation in which a new self-image and public definition of a person emerges as a result of the labeling that becomes difficult to change. Let me give you an example. So let's just say that I decided that I wanted to joyride, right? I wanted to steal a car. So I take a car, and maybe I've done it 2 or 3 times. Let's say I get caught. I'm in this primary deviation where I've been labeled now a felon, right? Grand Theft Auto. I get labeled that with a felon. And let's say that I do have to do some time. So I've done my time, but I come out, but I don't recognize or see myself as a felon. I still have my regular sense of self or my regular identity, social identity that I see myself as. However, what happens with this secondary deviation is because I've been labeled that, now whenever I go to apply for a job, I have to check the box that says that I have committed a felony within the last 7 or 10 years, right? Or if I'm going to apply for an apartment, I have to check the box. Now I start to understand that label and maybe even start to identify as a felon because it may be difficult for me to get a job. So what may potentially happen is maybe I go back to stealing cars because I'm not able to get a job, because I have blocks from society. Now, one of the things is that in society, we say that if I've committed a crime, I've stolen a car, I've committed a crime, I've done my time, right? When I get out of prison, or if I was on probation or whatever, then I should say when I get out of prison, because probation is a little bit different. So when I get out of prison, what will happen is, because society continues to label me as a felon, I start to take on that label. One of the things is that whenever I have a stigmatized identity or stigmatized label, it is hard to get rid of. It is not something that I can just automatically get rid of. It's very difficult to get rid of because that's the way that society sees me. Okay. So persons with criminal convictions have a narrow set of options for legitimate employment, given the fact that most employees ask about convictions or may perform criminal background checks as a part of the application process. Labeling theory has examined the labeling and what happens after it, but it neglects the process that leads to a particular act being labeled as deviant. In addition, it is not clear, and this is some of the criticisms of labeling theory, it is not clear if secondary deviance occurs because of the label or because the deviant learns new forms of deviance by associating with other deviants.